Hi everybody, Jim Hamilton here with Core Resonance. This video is associated with my latest newsletter. My latest newsletter is called Intentional Allowing, and it's a extension of the last newsletter, which was called Allowing Begets Order. Now, allowing is one of the most powerful concepts there is. Why? Because we really have two opposites. We have love, we have hate. We have allowing, and we have resistance. It's the polarities, and frankly, just like you can only be a little bit, you want to be a little bit pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant, you can't really be a little bit allowing. What we really are learning how to do is we're learning how to allow, because what is predominant on this planet is resistance. Now, the problem with resistance, when you understand how law of attraction works, is what you focus on expands, and resistance is focus. In fact, often resistance is focus with emotion associated with it. And so you might say emotion catalyzes focus and creates, you might say, even more powerful realities. So when you're in resistance, and let's say you're angry in resistance, you can readily make some really big mistakes in a hurry that take how long to straighten out? Years, sometimes a lifetime. If you're really, really lucky, you can have a big resistance, a big blow up, an angry situation, turn it around in 5 minutes. That's how you know you're getting smart. Now, of course, even smarter is to learn how to allow. I'll tell you something kind of interesting. I notice in traffic, we live in I don't want to say we live in a civilized world, because I think there's less and less evidence of that every day. But do you realize how civilized traffic is in the United States of America? People have, for the most part, and I mean for the most part, 99.5%, they allow in traffic. They let each other in. They're courteous. It might be a big chunk of what allowed Americans to advance rapidly, because allowing is a very large component of the success of the highway and the road system in this country. When you're out there, think about it and look at it. I mean, everybody's walled up in their little steeled vehicles with their tinted windows and their air conditioning and their radio. They're in their own little worlds. They could be going bonkers, but you know what they're doing? They're relaxed a little bit, they're allowing a little bit, and you know what? They take it into their lives, into other parts of their lives. Allowing is a very big factor. In fact, the universe works based on allowing. Everything operates with each other. Everything shares. There's a scale of order that everything abides by. Now, you take the principle of allowing, and let's say you're in a relationship that has suddenly gone south, or let's say you've suddenly lost a job, or let's say that a death in the family or a death of a loved one. Allowing is extremely powerful right there, and if you're experienced with allowing, it's much easier to do. Much, much, much easier to do. And in fact, if you're really an experienced allower, a real experienced lover of life, even in death, you can allow. I'll tell you a little story on the side. I've read, I imagine this would be through a parable or Zen parable or some kind of a teaching, that when Buddha died, 500 BC approximately, when he died, people loved Buddha so much that it took him 500 years to totally extract himself from this dimension. So really that kind of love wasn't allowing, it was grabbing and grasping and being upset that he was suddenly gone. So there's more to allowing than we know. But the point is, allowing is where we start, and it's actually where we end. In fact, when you ever get around to dying yourself, I would hope that you have a good handle on allowing so that you can transition through this period eyes wide open. That's actually one of the goals for myself in this lifetime. is to die fully aware, eyes wide open. As I try to get back to my point, when something big happens in your life, a death, time for a relationship breakup, allowing is where you have to go. And because otherwise it's resistance. We know what happens with resistance. Resistance kind of keeps you joined at the hip. And even, you have one of them is maybe poking more at the other and causing more trouble, and the other one tends to react, and it keeps that dynamic going. And the only way you break it is by one of them beginning by allowing. Now, of course, being fired from a job, a death in the family, allowing doesn't have that back and forth, but you still got that mental run up to what's going on. And the sooner you start to allow, the sooner you will feel better. Now, in a conversation with a client a few weeks ago, we discovered an understanding about allowing that jumps the whole thing to another level. And that's why this article is called Intentional Allowing. So let's say you have a circumstance where you suddenly get overloaded with life. Death in the family, a major job loss, relationship issue. Yeah, allowing is the answer, because resistance doesn't work. You can resist all you want. I think actually most of us have done enough of that. But when we hold a vision for what we want, in other words, if we have the wherewithal, instead of that back and forth or just being lost in the sorrow of the difficulty, if we could instead move to the vision of what we want in our lives. I want to be happy. I want to be in a relationship. I want to be in love. I want to be happy. And you hold that as your vision, and then you allow. You're not allowing the difficult, you're allowing what you want. Now, curiously, a couple of things can happen. For one, the person that you're with that you no longer want to be with, one of two things will happen. By the way, you've now become the leader in the relationship because you're no longer reacting to the other person. One of two things will happen. That person will line up and become the person that you're hoping for. And of course, you have to make that decision, but that's okay. But the other thing is they'll fall away. And the reason they'll fall away is because the dynamic that used to be no longer exists. You'd be surprised how many people get used to sucking energy from other people. And frankly, most of us do it. I don't want to say most of us do it all the time, but I'd say most of us do it all the time. And we scavenge energy from each other. We can do it in lovely ways. We can do it in debilitating ways. But unless we're getting our energy from the cosmos direct, I'd suggest that we're getting energy from each other. And as we move into allowing, at the very least, it bumps up to much higher quality. So as we learn how to hold a vision of what we want, we can actually use the situation that's giving us our difficulty to hold a vision of what's next. In other words, there's a principle from Abraham Hicks material, out of contrast comes clarity. So out of the contrast of the relationship that doesn't work, you hold a vision for what you do want, and basically you ignore everything else. Now, obviously, when you have a breakup and there's other kinds of scenarios, you don't get to just totally walk away. But as you deal with these old things, because you have all this old momentum that has to be dealt with, has to be cleaned up. But instead of simply allowing these things as they come along, instead you have a new perspective, and it's what you want in your life. And so out of the contrast comes clarity. You hold a vision for what you become clear about. And that's how you use this whole thing. Since I have just a little bit more time, let me throw out an idea. Most of us live our lives, all of us, based on patterns and habits. Core resonance says the subconscious mind is an accumulation of patterns and habits that we've learned, often as a product of skinning our knee, or the first kiss we didn't get, or a million different things that'll never happen to me. And so we have a great deal of unconscious programming. I say that's what the subconscious mind is the brain has accumulated patterns and habits, mostly escaping what we don't want. But when these traumatic events happen, our patterns are really scrambled. We're out of our, I mean, you're on overload. That's what overload is. Your patterns and habits are no longer holding you up. You're having to manually process everything, and what's in front of you is so much. You simply go into overload. That's kind of what depression is. It's all the same thing. So I suggest that when these kinds of trauma come into your life, recognize that it's an opportunity to become clear about what you do want. Recognize that the patterns and habits that have held your life together so very successfully or not so very successfully are now up for grabs. And what that means is this is the time you can rebuild them. So out of contrast comes clarity. You get into these traumatic events, they're a major opportunity to rebuild your patterns and habits, reestablish what's important for you. And so trauma is one of the ways to do that. Now the other is core resonance training itself, because I work with the brain. We give the brain exercises. The brain is in motion during the exercises. It reestablishes patterns and habits right in the core resonance training. So other than trauma as a means of reestablishing patterns and habits, which is a very powerful opportunity. And by the way, what a time for a coach. That, when you're in trauma, when you're in overload, when you're in the weeds, that's when you want coaching. Oh, by the way, I do coaching over the phone, been very, very successful over the phone. A little aside there, accidental, that's not what I... So what we want to learn how to do, we want to learn how to do attentional allowing. A great opportunity for it is when we have a trauma in our life, something that takes us into overload, throws us out of order a little bit. Maybe there's things that need to change in our life. And as we learn how to harness this process, as we learn how to be a visionary when everything is up for grabs, as we learn how to get clear about what we want, we can change our lives. We can learn how to allow. Now, the next article I'm going to talk about, I've discovered what it's about, and I think it's I don't know what it's called yet, but it's the difference between focus and intention, because focus is a little bit too limited. Intention is much broader, so we're holding a vision for what we want. That is about focus or intention, and if you do it with intention, the bandwidth is much wider. It allows innate intelligence to partner with you in your coming and new reality creating. And I will catch up with you guys next time. Namaste. Thank you.